conversation tonight with Home Affairs Minister Dr. Arron Motsoaledi. This as a group calling itself Newzroom Africans Against Xenophobia have come strongly against the government position on the ZEP project, saying the end of the ZEP project is a government shifting policy to make documented migrants undocumented. And this is the politicians, or at least Minister Motsoaledi, indicating to the broader populace that he's not deaf to the anti-migrant sentiment that is on the ground. And this would have been, of course, that is a perfect opportunity, shall I say, for him to make a political statement ahead of 2024. Well, the minister joins us now to talk to us more on this and what plans are in place to deal with migration in the country, which he says is a crisis that has been in the making for decades. Minister, good evening, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. As I mentioned, Minister, an organization newly formed, actually, just the other day, they came together, they marched, and they're planning to do another march, saying you are using the end of the ZEP project to indicate to the general populace that you are not deaf to the anti-foreign sentiment on the ground, and that this you're using as a political tool to gain support ahead of the 2024 elections. What do you say to that?
Well, Tabo, that's rubbish, actually. And I'm not going to be blackmailed into that, because if I allow myself to be blackmailed, I will never be able to run the states. We have explained many times, Tabo, how the issue of the Zimbabwe special dispensation came about. The special dispensation was not only given to Zimbabweans, it was also given to Basotho, it was also given to Angolans. And I want to define exactly the conditions under which it was given, I mean the circumstances surrounding it. The Refugee Act in South Africa was enacted in 1998. If you check Tabo at that time, the continent was fast democratizing. Even countries that never used to elections went for elections. Countries that had a constitution that allow a person to rule for life started limiting terms, started changing constitutions. And where there is a coup, the African Union will never recognize it. So it was fast democratizing, and the act was enacted at that time. And the design of the refugee situation in South Africa was made to fit that situation. Now, all of a sudden, things changed. And by the way, that year, in 1998, only 11,000 people came to South Africa to ask for asylum. All of a sudden, in 2008, the number changed to 207,000, coming at the same time, and mostly were from Zimbabwe. And the following year, another 227,000. Within a period of 2 years, you are faced with more than 400,000 people asking for asylum. Now, the system was not designed for that. It was overrun, and people started defrauding documents. Home Affairs then said, let's give them special permits in order to deal with this situation. That's how this issue of special permit, Basotho special permit, happened. And there was a belief that the situation will improve, will be able to build capacity to deal with them, because we are aware that many of economic migrants, but they were simply presenting themselves as asylum seekers. Now remember that an asylum seeker is not just a person who defines that I'm an asylum seeker. They must fit into the definition according to United Nations Convention of 1951. So we're hoping that we'll be able to build capacity in order to deal with them in terms of that convention, but that was never to be. And successive Home Affairs ministers kept on postponing the problem by extending, and this thing was extended 4 times. Now, early last year, when we realized that we are left with 12 months for this new latest extension, which was done in 2017, for the latest extension to expire, we then sat down and started evaluating this whole thing. And we reached a conclusion somewhere by the middle of the year that, look, we can't just keep on renewing. Up to what end? How do you keep on renewing a temporary situation which was done because of a crisis, and you renew it forever? And remember, That situation said such people are not ruled by the normal immigration laws. And we said, no, the time has arrived that normal immigration laws must apply. So we are not changing any law.
Yeah.
The immigration laws has always been there. We are saying they must apply to every other person who comes here. It can't be that Zimbabweans and Basotho have got a different law to rule them when everybody else is under immigration laws. So this story that we are changing the laws and all that is not borne by facts.
Yeah. Are you pandering to the gallery? Are you pandering to the masses who are clearly unhappy because of the socioeconomic conditions in which they live in and the lack of employment, and therefore there has been this anti-foreign sentiment, and you are now also as politicians scapegoating migrants and blaming them for failures to deal with the economic woes in the country?
I've never even once scapegoated any migrant. At the time, we started looking at this exemption permit because we had to plan ahead for when it was going to expire. There were no masses who were doing what they are doing. There was no operation to do that. There was nothing. I told you we started at the beginning of 2021 in January, knowing that the Zimbabwean permit is going to expire in December 2021. So we had 12 months. We did that planning. So we're not pandering to anybody. We're just trying to manage our situation as we deem fit for our democracy.
Yeah, and there's a call for proper disaggregation of data about the movement in the country. For example, that we need to know exactly what is the number of migrants who are in the country and what number of those are undocumented. Many are saying you as a department, you've bungled that process. Even you don't have that kind of detail at this particular point to be able to kind of make the assertions that you're making.
Well, that's another nonsense, Thabo. That's another nonsense. People are just making wild statements without understanding how the situation is. And now I'll explain to you. We do have the number of people who are refugees in South Africa. And those are under international protection. We have got to have our numbers because we even give them IDs, specific IDs, because they are under international protection. We do have a number of asylum seekers in the country because a person to qualify to be an asylum seeker on a Section 22 permit must arrive at the refugee reception center and announce themselves that I'm here, I'm looking for asylum. And the fact that you take down their name, you photograph them, you take their fingerprint, that is documentation, and you give them a Section 22 permit, which allow them to go on and apply for refugee status. And the Section 22 permit gives them between 3 and 6 months, which is renewable. So we know that number. We know the number of people who are on a work visa because we have given them the visas, the number of people who are on who are permanent residents, the number of people who are naturalized, because every year we have got to report that even their names to Parliament. We know the number of people who are on student visas, who are on visitors visas, spousal visas. What we don't know is the number of people who are illegal, because illegal is clandestine. It's a clandestine activity. It's like saying, if we knew them, then they won't be here illegal, because we will have done something. Because they are in hiding, they don't want to come out. They've never recorded themselves anyway. They've just arrived. And we believe it's normal for a human being, when you arrive in any country, to announce yourself and say, I'm here, and tell us what you are looking for, and we see how to classify you. Now, those who are illegal, how do we know their number? Because even all the research organizations, including State South Africa, are doing an estimate. Some estimates are saying it's between 3.5 to 5 million people who are here illegally. But we don't have such figures. How can we have them? Because somebody who is illegal is exactly that. Is doing something illegally, has not reported themselves somewhere. Many of them don't even want to be known.
Now, how then do you respond to the question of the special dispensation holders who you are saying must now convert into the regular visa regime? They're saying, well, we did not qualify for the regular visa regime in the first place, and that's why we shifted to the special permit. Now, what essentially is going to happen, you are criminalizing migration, because now they are going to be illegal in the country because they won't be able to access that particular regular visa.
Who said they didn't qualify? How did they know they didn't qualify? How did they know that they didn't qualify for a regular visa? They shifted. They did not shift. They were offered. And I gave reasons why they were offered. I just informed you that the refugee asylum seeker system was designed for very few people. And I gave you an example. In 1998, when the law was enacted, only 11,000 people came here. That's why they were able to be processed. The number kept on increasing. The highest number that South Africa ever received was in 2006, when 45,000 people came here asking for asylum. It was still possible to process them. Now, in 2008, when an avalanche, when Zimbabweans opened all the gates and all the borders and people rushed into South Africa, it was difficult to assess them. And because of that difficulty, the agreement was that let's give them a special dispensation, which special dispensation does not depend on the present immigration law where you assess them and classify them. They just get given as a special dispensation. And the word special means exactly that. It was special because they could not be processed. So for them to come and say, no, we did not qualify for this, how do you know that you did not qualify for this and that when you were actually not processed? Now we are saying, now that this thing has been extended many times, the time has arrived that we sit and process them because we think we are now ready to start processing them. And part of the reason why we are ready, we are working with United Nations to help us deal with the backlog. We have had meetings with them. They have helped us with money. We have hired people who are going to help. Even Treasury has given us extra money to hire more people. In them, then that they will know that they qualify. Then what do they want here? If you know that you don't qualify to be in a country, why do you stay?
We'll talk more on that question when we come back, the state of readiness then, as the minister outlines there. I know some vehicles have been bought. The minister was talking of special uniform for border control officers because they need to have their own identity, like the military, and so on and so forth. We'll touch on those issues in a moment. Do stay with us. Back live with us tonight here on In Focus Migration, under the spotlight as we speak to Home Affairs Minister Dr. Arron Motsoaledi. He's come under a lot of criticism lately with the stance and the position he's taken on the ZEP special dispensation, and of course he has been talking of this border control management team or task team that he's setting up. Well, there are no boots on the ground, and there have been a number of questions as to why this has not been set up until this point. Let's speak to the minister a little bit further on that. Minister, of course, you have been talking of this one-stop shop border management authority that you've been setting up for at least over 24 months now that you have been talking about it. Why have there been no boots on the ground up until this point?
Thabo, before answering the issue of boots on the ground, I heard you saying I've come under tremendous criticism. I just want to make it clear to you, I don't feel any criticism. I'm just doing my job in terms of the laws of the country, in terms of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, in terms of the interest of the country. Anything you called criticism, I am absolutely not feeling it. And I'll continue doing what I'm doing until somebody shows me that what I'm doing is outside the realms of the law, because I cannot act illegally. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
Yes. Let's come to the yes. I thought that must be made very clear. As long as I'm working within the law, I'm not feeling anybody's criticism, because they can't force me to work outside the law in terms of their whims and their feelings. This country is not run on whims and feelings of people. It's run on the base of the law. We've got the Constitution, which is respected by everybody, and it must be followed. Now, having said so, Thabo, this issue of the Border Management Authority, again, you establish an authority in terms of the law, and the law had been passed, and only in November, I heard some people, when they want to criticize further, saying we have appointed commissioners from September. No. The commissioner of the Border Management Authority started on the 1st of November. That was the time the regulations and the laws of the country were allowing for an appointment. Then in December, then the 2 deputy commissioners joined them. So they started work basically in January. And if you count up to now, it's less than 3 months. And they started doing work and they started putting up systems that must run the Border Management Authority. Now the issue called boots on the ground are the border guards, who they were only able to issue an advert, which only closed on Monday last week. So it's only a week there was a closure. There are still going to be interviews and all that. So there was no gap. We're just following procedures as normal as the government does when it put up a new structure. This structure is very new, and only in January next year, the structure will be a standalone 3D entity of the state. At the moment, it's still temporary under the auspices of Home Affairs Department as a branch. So we also need to have, according to the Act, a ministerial committee, which is not appointed by the president as is normally the practice, but is appointed by the Act itself, which nominates 9 ministers. They've already met once. They are meeting for the second time this week because they'll meet once per quarter to make the rules under which appointments must be made, etc. So there's a whole lot of activity going on. It's only that, yes, we have not yet seen the outward activity of warm bodies like you see this police and the army. And the police and the army did not come about in one day. It was also a process, if you have to follow how South Africa got its army, how it got its police force. It's not something that you just twinkle your fingers and bravo, there they are. You have to follow certain systems and procedures, and that's what we are doing.
Now, you, of course, are doing this with, in theory, the hope that this will prevent illegal immigrants from crossing the border. Are you doing this purely out of hope, that you hope this will happen, or do you have a real strategy in place to strengthen the security of the country at our borders?
It's not out of hope, Thabo. This whole thing started 10 years ago. If you go back to Parliament, you'll realize that the issue of Border Management Authority started 10 years ago. It started after NICOC. The NICOC is the structure that coordinates all the intelligence services in the country. Internal intelligence, military intelligence, crime intelligence, whatever intelligence services there, they come together under NICOC. When NICOC was doing the risk estimates on the country, they came across this problem and they made a proposal that a Border Management Authority must be established. Parliament started that process and it took them 10 years because there was no clear agreement by political parties what this Border Management Authority must look like. Even now, there are parties who voted against it. They did not want it, the Border Management Authority. Some of them voted against it for different reasons. So it's not just a hope. It's a plan that was informed by security situation, by security experts, and taken to Parliament and debated there. That's basically what you are doing when you say a Border Management Authority. And if you look at the article which I penned for City Press on Sunday, I was saying after democracy, because before that, South Africa was a pariah of the world. When it now became a darling of the world, borders were forgotten about. Nobody focused on the borders. And that's why we arrived here where we are. So when the defense estimates, intelligence estimates were made, they were showing that no, we have neglected the borders and it's a problem. And that was done 10 years ago. It's not something that is new.
So technically then, Minister, how do you plan to give the borders some attention so you strengthen the security of the country?
Well, if you go and read the Border Management Authority, they clearly outline how that is going to happen. The Border Management Authority is not going to stop immigration, Thabo. Immigration, as the article I've penned for City Press shows, it's a global phenomenon. People always move around. All that the Border Management Authority is going to do is to stop people from coming illegally, to show them that South Africa on the land has got 53 gates of entry which are official. Go there, and when you come through, you'll be documented. then you'll come into the country, at least with some form of a document. And then we also have 11 airports, international airports, through which you can enter with a passport and all that. And then you can also enter through the sea. We've got 8 seaports. So all that the Border Management Authority will do is to encourage the people. No, don't cross this line, borderline, illegally. Go to the border gates where you talk for yourselves. If you don't have documents, maybe you are running away because there is war in your country. It's provided for in the United Nations Convention of 1951, because it clearly says if there's a natural disaster in your country, you are allowed to run to the nearest country and look for a refugee there. And then if there is also war in your country, you are allowed to run without any documents, but we must be documented when you arrive there. It also says if you are being persecuted in your country for your political beliefs and activities, for your traditional beliefs and practices, for your religious practices, and for your sexual orientation, you can also come without papers. But when you arrive at the border, you announce yourself. You don't move around, hide behind trees and all that, and come in clandestinely. That's what the Border Management Authority is going to tell you. That no, look here, there is a port of entry. Go and enter there and announce yourself. And we think that is the right way to come to another person's country.
So some are saying then, Minister, you are now sending those refugees back home who came here on, I don't want to go back to the special dispensation issue because you have explained it, but in essence, they're saying they are still economic refugees. In one clip, I hear you saying that the economic conditions of our neighboring countries is something that has become precarious and something that needs to be looked into at the bodies that are relevant to deal with those issues like the AU and so on and so forth. Is that part of what is being done so that you do not have this influx of people wanting to come to South Africa for better economic opportunities?
Let's start here, Tau. Sending people home doesn't start now. An act of parliament was passed long ago in terms of the Refugee Act of 1998 and the Immigration Act of 2002. So it's decades that it has been there, whereby certain people get arrested, sent to Lindela Repatriation Center. Lindela is an institute which was formed statutorily by a law of parliament. It's not illegal, where you send people there, call their ambassadors to identify them. Before COVID, at least 20,000 people were deported every year back to their countries. And unfortunately, because we did not have the border as a seas of movement, so sending people back home is not something that is new. It's also recognized, by the way, by the United Nations itself in terms of their convention on under what conditions do you deport people. So deportation is not about that. So that's the first thing. The second thing, yes, you are right. I've already said in this article that we are dealing with economic migration, and a person only migrates and runs away from their country when there are economic problems. If the economy is not doing well, if economies improve, like the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is trying to resolve that problem through the AU, if the economy improves, there's no need for people to run around looking for better, greener pastures. And so there's nothing wrong in calling for improvement of economies of country. It's not a sin. That is the right thing to do.
Minister, we appreciate your time as always. Thank you very much for making the time to come and talk to us. Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Arron Motsoaledi, there, outlining some of the work that they are doing to improve the situation of security in the country and the manning of our borders, so to speak.